Hey there, Sunday School. All right, our story for today is called Jesus Reinstates Peter. Interesting. Okay, so the story takes place a little bit after Jesus had died on the cross and risen from the dead. And what was happening now is Jesus was kind of appearing to different people so that they could see that he was alive. And he had appeared to his disciples um, a couple times, and this was one of those times that he appeared to them after he had risen from the dead. Okay, so before I tell you what happened in this story, I want you to think back to when Jesus was arrested before he was crucified on the cross. Do you remember which of the disciples was like, I love you so much, Jesus. I'm never going to ever deny you. I'm going to stick by your side. I'll do anything. I love you so much. Do you remember which disciple that was? And Jesus said, no, you're actually going to pretend like you don't even know me because you're going to be too scared and you're going to leave me all on my own. So, do you remember who that was? It was Peter. Peter. Now, Peter really did love Jesus, but Peter was a sinner. So, if you remember that Friday night when Jesus was arrested, Peter did exactly what Jesus said he was going to do. Peter was standing at the fire. It was nighttime. It was kind of cold, so he was keeping himself warm, and there were other people there. And they looked at Peter, and they were like, oh, you know Jesus. You're one of his friends. And Peter, 3 times, that's important, 3 times. 3 times Peter said, no, I don't. I don't know him. And on and on and on. So that had happened, okay? So keep that in mind. That was, it had just happened recently. And now Peter was hanging out with some of the other disciples. It was during the day, they were hanging out, and Peter was just like, you know what? I'm going to go fishing. What do you guys think? And the disciples who were with him were like, yeah, let's go. So they all headed out to, they got on the boat, they headed out to the sea, and they started fishing. And they fished all night long. The best time to fish is at nighttime because that's when they all come out. So they fished and they fished and they fished and they fished, and it was all night. And guess how many fish they caught? None. They caught no fish. None. So the sun was coming up. It was morning now. They had fished all night long. It was dawn, and they're like, clearly we're not catching anything. Let's go back to shore. So they headed back to shore, and before they had made it all the way back, so they could see the shore, but like they were still, like 100 yards away. They saw like a man out there on the shore, and the man yelled to them, hey guys, did you catch any fish? And they were like, no, no, we didn't catch any fish. And this man said, oh, well, here's what you should do. You should cast your net, because they used nets back then, cast your net on the right side of your boat. And so they did. They were like, okay. So they cast their net on the right side of the boat. And lo and behold, so many fish got stuck in their net that it like was bulging. They couldn't even get it into the boat because it was so full of fish. And when this happened, John, one of the disciples who was there with Peter, John looked up and he said to Peter, he's like, that's the Lord. It's Jesus. And Peter immediately jumped out of the boat and like waded through the water, probably tumbling and swimming and tumbling again. And he got to Jesus on the shore. He was so excited to see Jesus. And the rest of the disciples, they had to be the ones to carry the net in. So they dragged the boat with the net in it and got all the fish to the shore. Well, Jesus had been on the shore, and he said to Peter and the disciples, here, I made a fire, and let's make some breakfast. There's fish, and Jesus had some bread. Let's make some breakfast. So he's like, get some of your fish and put it on the fire. And the disciples had actually caught 153 large fish. We're talking big fish, guys. So they got some of their fish. They put them on the fire. They're super excited to have breakfast with Jesus. And as they were eating, Jesus kind of like took Peter aside. And now remember what Peter had done. And Peter, he was still feeling pretty guilty for saying that he didn't even know Jesus when Jesus needed him the most. And Jesus knew that. So he wanted to talk to Peter and to show him that he was forgiven and that he had a job for Peter to do. So he took Peter aside and he's like, Peter, son of John, do you love me? And Peter said, yes, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And then Jesus replied, feed my lambs. Who is he talking about? Well, when Jesus talks about like sheep or lambs, he's referring to all of God's people, all people that he loves, which is everyone. He wants people to have food, which in this case, he's talking about God's word. So feed them, tell them God's word, tell them about me. After he said that, Jesus looked at Peter again. He said one more time, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And so Jesus said, feed my lambs. And then a third time, Jesus looked at Peter and he said, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's feelings got kind of hurt because he's like, of course I do. And so when Jesus had asked it the third time, Peter looked at Jesus and he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus shook his head and he said, all right, Peter, you are going to do many things throughout your life that are going to glorify me. Come and follow me. And that was how Jesus showed Peter that he was forgiven for sinning and that he had a big job to do for the rest of his life. And that is the story of Jesus reinstating Peter. Bye.